All right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I know post lunch. Good afternoon again, everyone. I know it's the last session. I am the only one standing between your AMA and going home. So I'll try to make it quick and light so that you don't feel sleepy. And I'll try to add some jokes, bad jokes or good jokes. So I try to entertain you as well. My name is Zameer, as Jayesh introduced. Thanks for the introduction, Jiva. My name is Zameer. I'm a developer relations engineer here at Neuralink. I work with community and work with a lot of developers like yourself. I love talking. I love anything about technology. So my topic for today is nothing fancy. There's no GPT. There's no AI. It's back to basics. It's logs. Now, who hasn't worked here with logs? If anybody tells me they have not seen the logs, they're not really working in development. They're working in something else. So we have a saying among our peers, no logs, no lives. So back in my day, to give a backstory, when I started my career, there was a performance bug that was bothering a service. Now for that, I had to analyze multiple gigabytes of plain text logs. Imagine the pain. Today we have so many options, so many tools to easily analyze the logs, find the patterns. But some teams, some companies just don't want to adapt to any tools. But that was one of the pain points. Now going through the logs, I started liking it because first thing they had any issues, what do we think for? Oh, what's in the logs? I'm building a simple plain script. Let me add some scripts. Let me add some logs. How do I find if my script is working or not? Logs. Any JavaScript developers here? What do you add for debugging? Do you use debugger first or do you add console.log here? Exactly. So today's topic is all about logs and how Azure helps us with providing so many options and how we can best adapt to for our use cases. So let's see. Now, extending my story, I deployed a simple application on Azure when I first started with Azure. It was nothing fancy, Express application, some REST API. It got deployed successfully. Now, as the excited engineer I was, I want to check the logs. So in the Azure Services UI, in the search bar, I typed log. That's the result that I got. Now I see so many options with logs. And naturally, this was my reaction. Which one do I go for? What am I looking for? Where do I see my logs actually? Where are my application logs coming? So as the curious nature of a developer, I started digging. I started learning which one is the best one, which is the right one, and what are these other options. So with that, I came with these 5 things that Azure has today. For the beginners, I'd say anyone starting with should be focusing on these 5 things. And these are the 5 common things across all the Azure services. Now, why should you care? If you notice, there are 5 different things. It can cater to 5 different use cases. We'll talk about it, each of it. First one, log stream. So when I started looking into log stream, when I did not find my logs, I hit it, I entered the screen. I realized, oh, it's live streaming my logs directly from my application. How is this happening? So by default, Azure enables log stream for your applications. So we do not have to enable anything. Out of the box, this is provided. Now, benefit for this is we don't have to look for our files. We don't have to do tail minus f my log file to see what's coming and whatnot. You can really start looking at your logs, how the service is behaving, just to have a quick health check. This is handy and this is available for most of your services, and you don't have to configure it. This was a basic one. Now, when I started digging into diagnostic settings of application services, I came across so many options. Now on the left-hand side, those options can vary depending on service to service, what service you're using within Azure. For me, it was an app services. So I have console logs, service logs, and HTTP logs. And on the right-hand side is something that's really curious. So we have 4 different options. If you see log analytics, storage, event, and partner. I'll be talking about each of it, but to highlight an overview, these are the settings which are natively available. Now, we don't have to do anything. I'll be talking about how we are configuring and how we are getting the data and what the effort needed. First one is log analytics. This is becoming my favorite in the Azure. Second favorite. I'll tell about my first favorite afterwards. Now, how is it my second favorite or becoming close? If you notice on the right-hand side, I have Send to Log Analytics workspace checked. Now, with this configuration once enabled, I do not have to restart my application or I don't have to do anything else. All I have to do is create a log analytics workspace. Now, that is a really simple click, click, click option within Azure. You go to Azure UI, you search for log analytics workspace, and you create default configuration, and you can just choose it. Once we have it configured and saved, we start seeing our logs directly in the analytics workspace. Now, with analytics workspace, there are way too many options which are good. But to start with, it provides a good intuitive KQL, which is Kusto query language. Pratik did a really good advanced session, if any one of you have attended that. So that KQL helps you analyze logs. It's a really intuitive query language. But if you notice, without doing much, just create the workspace, save it in the diagnostic settings, you're able to see our logs here. In this, if you notice, we have some ready-made queries available as well. So if you don't want to write queries and want to use some recommended reusable queries, it's readily available for you as well. The next one is pretty common use case you might be hearing. Archiving logs, what is the retention period, some keywords around that, more jargons. But if you have worked on a project where for compliance reasons, for any other reason, you want to archive your logs for later use, or you just want to store it for the reasons. It may be your government or it may be your company policy. Azure provides a native option for that. Azure storage account. Once we create a storage account, similar to the previous one, all we have to do is come to our diagnosis settings, choose the second option, which is archive to a storage account, and simply just choose your storage account. One thing which you need to be mindful of is the highlighted part, the retention period. With retention period, the value can range from 1 to 365 days. So if you want to retain for 1 year, you can provide the value. But if you want to retain forever, just remove all the values and add a 0. That will retain your logs forever in the storage account. Now, you need to be mindful of this because if you're retaining forever, storage account gives you a cost. It comes at a price. The storage account also provides a good storage browser. So if you want to see your file, export your file, or export any specific logs for analysis, or want to share around, it provides a good UI as well. So you don't have to get into any CLI. You can straight up go to UI. Now this one is something that's my first favorite, which I was keeping a secret. Now why is this my favorite? Event Hub PubSub model is already amazing. Now with Event Hub, it's so nice that you have complete control of what you want to do with the data that you're sending. You can write an Azure function and you can manipulate your data and export it to a storage account, or you can stream your logs to any external tools. Let's admit it, there's not one company that's using any single tool. I've seen 2 different teams at a single company using 2 different analytics tools. It could be Kibana, it could be some open source tool, or it could be someone's preference to use log analytics versus this. Now, why is this my favorite? I am able to control and export logs to where I want and how I want. To give you a highlight, I choose to use Event Hub in this fashion. There's my app services, and that's my diagnosis settings. Once I enable the logs to be streamed to Event Hub, I create a Azure function, which is set to trigger whenever a message appears or is sent in Event Hub. Once that is triggered, what I do, I have written a small code that takes the log file, log data, and sends it straight to Logs API of Neuralink. Now, this solution, why I like, again, this is really reusable. If you have any logs endpoint, you can just change it. And this is going to work for all your services. So this one solution, you will be able to export to multiple external applications, and it can support multiple format. Additional benefit, if you want to drop something from your logs, if you want to drop or transform something from your logs, or if you want to mask something that is sensitive from your applications, you have control because Azure function provides you to write a code, and you can do that. So how do we go about it? Again, we go back to diagnosis settings. This time we choose the third option. We choose stream to Event Hub. And then we choose our Event Hub namespace, our Event Hub function, our Event Hub namespace, and then the Event Hub. I choose my set of logs and done, save. Now what happens? What does the configuration look like? Once I have everything set up, this is my Azure function, which is really configurable. This is like 50 lines of code, JavaScript code. You can choose whatever language you want. If you notice, I have only two things which is required for me. One, the logs API endpoint, which again is customizable. You can change it to anything, or you can send it to multiple APIs. And the second is the message that I'm getting from Event Hub. Let's say if I have 10 different logs coming to Event Hub, Event Hub triggers the Azure function. This function will take all those messages, processes it, and sends it to Logs API. And at one shot, I get all my logs inside Neuralink. Now with Neuralink, it's also one of my favorite tools, and I work for Neuralink. So I can analyze and I can utilize features of Neuralink Logs UI, or simply if I have 10 different services and I want to see it in single screen, which is outside of Azure, I can use this. Now, as I mentioned, this solution is really nice because I get more control of what I want to do with my logs and where I want to send it. There is definitely at least one person who prefers a different tool or an open source solution. You can export this using this. Now, the fourth one, or the last one in the diagnostic settings, is partner integrations. This comes in handy for people who already have some form of subscription and use Azure Marketplace to add your integration. Two examples, if you notice here, is Elastic and Neuralink. For this example, I'll choose Elastic. Elastic is also one of the powerful tool. It has good analytics capabilities. It has Kibana. It has Logstash. So let's say if you are using Elastic and you want to export your logs to Elastic, all you do is go to your Azure Marketplace, add your Elastic integration. Once that is enabled, you come back here, you choose Elastic, hit save. Once that is done, you don't have to do anything else. Your application generates data, generates logs, and in the partner integration, or Elastic in this case, you'll start seeing your data. So what are the limitations of the options that I mentioned, especially with diagnostic settings? There's not much, just one. Let's say if you have multiple use cases or you want to use all at once, you may not be really able to do that because diagnostic settings supports only 5 different settings at once. So you may have to delete one or reuse one. So to recap, what do we get of this, and what trade-offs would you have to make. So effort versus reward thing, if you notice, log stream has really low effort because it comes out of the box. We don't have to do anything, no setup, and we are able to trail our logs directly. Logs to event hub, the effort is high, but what's the reward we get? We get absolute control. We are control of our data, how we want to manipulate, and what data we want to retain. You can also use this solution to transform the data, transform the logs, and send it back to log analytics. Totally up to you how you want to use it. You can get creative. It does require glue code, which is the Azure function, so you need to be careful there. With log analytics, the effort is really medium. We just need to create a log analytics workspace with its default settings, and we are good to go. And it requires some knowledge of KQL if you have not worked, but it's easy to catch up. There are a lot of available resources we can get started with. The log storage or archival, again, a very low effort thing. We don't have to do anything. We just need to have a storage account, and you can start sending your logs to your storage. The last one is partner solution. The effort is medium because depending on integration to integration, you might have to do some configuration once you add the integration from marketplace. But once that is done, the setup for the logs is again simpler. You just go to the diagnostic settings, choose your option, save, and you're done. Thank you. That's me on the right if you want to connect, and that's on the left. That is Neuralix DevRel. So if you want to explore more on the logs, we have hands-on workshops. You can go on, and it's a self-paced free lab, so you can go on about it. I'll leave it this for a few seconds before people take photos.
Can you share this? Any questions for? Any questions, guys?
Any questions? Any